The sky hung low over the coastal highway, thick with the scent of salt and the slow hush of wind brushing against forgotten fences. A narrow road snaked through the hills, empty but for the rumble of an old motorcycle echoing through the mist. It wasn't loud, not the kind meant to draw attention, but steady, low and deliberate. Dwayne Johnson rode hunched slightly forward, the collar of his worn brown coat turned up against the morning chill. His eyes, half hidden beneath a grey hoodie, stayed fixed on the stretch ahead. Not in a hurry, not looking for anything, just passing through. There was no convoy behind him, no drone above, no headlines chasing him this time. Only the engine's heartbeat and the occasional call of gulls in the distance. His duffel bag was strapped tight to the back, weathered, silent, holding things he hadn't dared unpack in days. The town appeared without announcement. A single-lane turn, a crooked sign, and then there it was, nestled between the cliffs. And the shore, faded paint, tilted mailboxes, quiet windows that watched more than they spoke. He slowed as he reached the diner. "Margie's Place," said the peeling wooden sign. No music, no neon, just a screen door that creaked when the wind touched it. The kind of place that poured coffee by the hour and never asked why someone looked tired. Dwayne parked the bike just outside, next to a chipped planter of wilting daisies. He didn't lock it, didn't need to. The bike wasn't just transportation, it was the last thread tied to someone he'd lost, someone he wasn't ready to talk about. Not yet. As he stepped inside, boots brushing dust from the step, the soft bell above the door jingled like a memory. Heads turned, subtly, cautiously. Two old men by the window paused their chess game. A young woman behind the counter froze mid-pour. A child peeked out from behind a laminated menu. No one spoke. Dwayne didn't flinch. He gave a soft nod, eyes calm as if to say, "Don't worry, I'm not here to take up space, just a seat." He slid into a booth at the back, placing his duffel beside him like an old friend. Outside, the bike stood in the mist, unmoving, patient, a symbol of a journey still running from something unnamed. Inside, the silence welcomed him. And somewhere, behind his stillness, grief waited, quiet, buried, but not gone. The coffee steamed gently in the chipped ceramic mug, untouched. Dwayne sat still in the corner booth, his shoulders relaxed but his eyes distant, watching raindrops crawl down the fogged-up window. A plate of eggs had gone cold beside him. He wasn't hungry. Not really. He just needed the quiet, the kind that wrapped around your bones and made the world seem slower, safer. Outside, the sky had begun to clear, the mist thinning, sunlight spilling in like forgiveness. His bike stood like a statue, parked neatly, proud in its age. It had stories in its bolts, echoes in its paint. It wasn't a possession, it was a memory on wheels. But across the street, someone else watched it differently. Jax stood near, the corner of a rusted mailbox, his hands jammed into the pockets of a threadbare hoodie, his jaw clenched, eyes hard, breathing shallow. The wind pulled at his clothes, but his stare didn't budge. He'd seen the man roll in, seen the quiet power, the calm presence. It made his skin crawl. All his life, Jax had been told he'd never be anything. And now this man, this perfect stranger, shows up with a bike that looked like freedom, like peace. It should have been me, he thought. People should have looked at me like that once. In his fist, a matchbook. From the gas station down the road, thumb striking the edge. Once, twice, third time, a flame. Jax moved fast, not calculated, just angry. Angry at the world for forgetting him, at men like that for being everything he couldn't be. He didn't even check if someone was watching. He just dropped the flame near the bike's seat. It caught faster than he expected. The gas fumes, the leather, the age of it. It roared to life in an orange scream. Inside, the bell above the diner door jingled sharply. Dwayne felt the change. Before he saw it, a flicker of light in the corner of his vision. He turned slowly, then stood, not rushed, not panicked, but something in his chest cracked before he even reached the door. Smoke billowed, the sound of gas popping, flames licking up chrome and memory. A small crowd began to form. Gasps, murmurs, someone already reaching for their phone. Dwayne stepped out into the thick smoke. He didn't shout, he didn't run. He just stared, like a man watching the last photograph of someone he loved curl into ash, and the only sound louder than the fire was his silence. The smoke curled upward like a ghost, thin and restless, blurring the lines between memory and loss. The frame of the motorcycle, now nothing but scorched metal and twisted parts, hissed in the breeze as plastic crackled and chrome turned black. Dwayne didn't speak. He didn't move quickly. He stood there as if the heat belonged to someone else, his shadow long and quiet against the pavement. The crowd had grown, maybe a dozen now, scattered along the sidewalk, pretending not to stare. Their whispers buzzed beneath the wind. Why isn't he doing anything? That was his bike, right? Someone should call the cops. But Dwayne didn't need noise. Rage was a cheap currency, and right now, what burned wasn't just the bike. It was something older, something rooted deeper. He crouched down slowly, one knee to the asphalt, and stared at the smoldering frame. Ash stained the cuff of his coat. The air around him shimmered with heat, but his face didn't flinch. His fingers reached out, not to touch, but to hover above the license plate. It was warped, melted around the edges, but the numbers still showed. Barely. That plate wasn't factory, it was hand-shaped. His father's hands, back when they didn't shake. Back when the world still felt wide and full of maybe. He saw it then, not in front of him but behind his eyelids, a dusty garage. His teenage self slamming the door behind him after shouting something cruel. His father, silent as always, not chasing. Just returning to the workbench, rubbing grease into guilt. 2 weeks later, that bike rolled up their gravel driveway. Rusted, sure, dented, but alive. His father never said it outright, but the message was welded into the engine block. Let's try again. That bike had been their handshake, their peace treaty, their second chance, and now it was gone. Still kneeling, Dwayne exhaled, long, slow. Smoke curled into his breath like it was trying to stay with him. He looked up, and only then did people take a step back, not out of fear, but reverence, because they realized something. He wasn't broken by this, he was honoring it. Someone in the back whispered, "Why is he not yelling?" And someone else replied, "Maybe he doesn't need to." Dwayne stood, his coat, once brown, now dusted with ash. He looked out across the crowd, not accusing, just aware. They wanted a reaction, a performance, a storm, but he gave them stillness. Because sometimes grief doesn't scream, sometimes it just kneels beside what it loved and breathes in the smoke. The crowd's unease shifted like wind against brittle leaves, first quiet, then restless. Whispers turned into sentences, sentences twisted into opinions. It wasn't just about the fire anymore. Jack stood a few feet back, arms folded, trying to look unmoved, but his jaw was tight, his fingers twitched. His breath came faster than the cold air demanded. "I didn't know it was his," he blurted, loud enough for half the sidewalk to hear. No one asked him. No one needed him to speak. But guilt doesn't like silence. I mean, look at it. Who even rides something like that around here anyway? He added, voice rising, brittle. What did he expect? Roll in like some kind of hero? This ain't Hollywood. A few heads turned toward him, not with sympathy, with discomfort. One woman near the diner's door murmured, "It was a stupid thing to do." A man beside her crossed his arms. "He's a celebrity, probably insured. He'll be fine." But it wasn't about money. Everyone could feel that. Now, Jax looked at Dwayne, waiting, maybe for a punch or a curse or a show of the strength the world expected from him. But Dwayne just stood there, still. That silence unnerved everyone more than shouting ever could. For From the back of the crowd, boots shuffled over gravel. An older man stepped forward, wide shoulders, graying hair tucked beneath a faded navy cap. His jacket bore the faint imprint of a fire department patch, long washed out, but still proud. He eyed Dwayne for a long second, then asked, voice low but steady, "Why aren't you fighting back?" The question hung in the cold like breath you could see. Dwayne turned toward him, finally speaking. His voice was calm, worn smooth by time. "Not raised an inch, because someone needs to stop the fire," he said, "not feed it." A few in the crowd looked down. One man nodded slowly. The firefighter didn't reply right away, but there was something behind his eyes, respect or maybe recognition. Not of the celebrity, but the man who chose stillness over spectacle. Jax shrank a little. He had lit the match, but now the heat was somewhere else. Dwayne stepped past him slowly toward what remained of the bike. The crowd parted without a word, and as he knelt once more, brushing ash from the plate, a new silence fell, one not born of shock, but of learning. The scrapyard sat at the edge of town, where the hills lost their shape and everything smelled, faintly of rust and oil. Rows of metal bones stretched across the gravel, broken machines waiting for their last rites. The sky hung low, stained in pale grays, the kind of color that made memories echo louder. Dwayne walked the aisles slowly, boots crunching glass and grit. The wind pressed against his coat, but he didn't pull it tighter. In his hand, wrapped in a cloth, was the charred license plate, the only piece that still felt like part of the bike. Inside the garage, the owner sat hunched over a radiator, scribbling in a logbook. He looked up, wiped his hands on a rag. "You're the guy from the fire," he said. Not a question. Dwayne nodded once and unwrapped the metal in his palm. Thought maybe... He hesitated, placing it gently on the counter. "Someone like you might know how to bring it back." The man picked it up with both hands, respectful, the way someone might hold an old photo. He turned it in the light. "That's not just melted," he muttered. "That's gone." Dwayne let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Not disappointment, something older. Acceptance. "Can't even weld to that frame anymore," the owner added, almost apologetic. Dwayne nodded, reaching over to take the plate back. He didn't argue, didn't push. He just whispered, "Thanks," and turned to go. That night the town had gone still, the kind of stillness that comes after hard conversations and headlines. Dwayne sat beneath a crooked streetlight on the edge of the park. The bulb above him buzzed and flickered, casting long shadows across the pavement. A teenager sat nearby, legs stretched out, hoodie pulled over his ears. He'd seen the fire. Hadn't said much at the time, but hadn't looked away either. Dwayne pulled the plate from his coat and turned it in his fingers. "That bike," he began softly, "wasn't just metal. My dad built it, back when I ran away at 16. The Antine looked over, surprised. Dwayne didn't look like someone who'd ever run from anything. I said some things I shouldn't have, slammed the door, thought I knew better. He paused. 2 weeks later he showed up, not with an apology, not with words, but with that bike, barely held together, rusted to the bone. He rebuilt it in front of me, every day in silence. The teen didn't interrupt. Dwayne looked down at the plate. It wasn't a gift, it was his way of saying, "Let's start over." He smiled faintly, the kind that pulls at something deep. That's what that bike was. Forgiveness, rebuilt. One bolt at a time. The streetlight flickered once more, and in that small circle of failing light, something unspoken passed between them. A lesson welded in ash. The morning light was flat and colorless, casting a pale film over the town. Fog hadn't yet lifted, and the streets felt softer because of it, like the world was still deciding whether to wake up or stay quiet a little longer. Jax opened, his front door with the same grumble he wore on his face. Sleep still clung to his eyes, and shame still clung to his chest. He hadn't said much since yesterday, hadn't known what to say. The fire had happened. Dwayne hadn't yelled. The bike had burned, and yet It was Jax who couldn't sleep. He reached into his rusted mailbox. The hinge screeched, expecting nothing but bills. Maybe another flyer he'd tossed straight into the gutter. But there it was. A single envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just one word, Jax. The handwriting was steady, clean, measured. He looked around. No one nearby. The fog held secrets. He tore it open slowly, hands trembling despite the stillness. Inside, not folded with precision, not typed, not signed with flourish, just paper, ink, words that breathed. I once burned a bridge so badly. My father didn't speak to me for 3 years. I thought anger made me powerful. That silence made me right. I waited for an apology. It never came. But something else did. A broken bike. Rusted, worthless to anyone else. He rebuilt it in front of me, piece by piece, every day without saying a word. He was fixing more than metal. Jack swallowed. His breath caught somewhere between guilt and awe. You burned what reminded me of him, but maybe it's not the end of that story. Maybe it's the start of yours. Sometimes we light fires because we're tired of being invisible. But if you want to be seen, really seen, don't burn to get attention. Build something that makes people look twice. You still can. Jack sat down on the porch step, the letter shaking gently in his fingers. No signature, no demand, just that last line. He read it again, and somewhere deep in his chest, past the armor, past the noise, something moved. He didn't understand everything, but he understood enough to know. The fire hadn't ended something. It had started something he wasn't ready for, but maybe, just maybe, he needed it. The fog lifted slowly in the days that followed, like the town itself was exhaling something it had held too long. The fire was out. The ashes had cooled. But the silence Dwayne left behind still lingered. In coffee, shops, in street corners, in the subtle pause before someone spoke his name. People didn't talk about the bike anymore. They talked about the man who didn't raise his voice, the one who stood still in front of fire and didn't flinch. Not because he was made of stone, but because he carried something heavier than anger. At Margie's diner, the burn mark on the brick wall where the bike had once rested became a quiet shrine. Margie herself, sleeves rolled, apron stained, with years of stories, began painting over the blackened brick, not to cover it, but to remember it. Each evening she worked with soft strokes, the faint outline of the bike re-emerging in color, chrome and shadow. Not perfect, not polished, but full of life. Above the mural, she painted the words with her own hands. Some rides never stop, they just change roads. People would stop on their way home just to stare. They'd sip coffee slower, talk softer, like they were walking through something sacred, not spoken. Kids who once gawked at celebrity now whispered about dignity. Teenagers asked about forgiveness, like it was a skill they might someday need. Even the man who'd first mocked Dwayne on the train never came back into town without looking down. And Jax? He walked past the mural every morning, sometimes paused, sometimes didn't, but he never walked by without feeling something shift inside. The town didn't build a statue, didn't post on social media. They did something quieter, more lasting. They remembered. And for the first time in a long while, they remembered someone not for the fame he wore, but for the fire he didn't. Throwback. The morning was quieter than usual. Not empty, just softened. A light breeze moved through the town like a final note hanging in the air after the music had stopped. Dwayne stood at the edge of the park, coat zipped to his neck, duffel slung over one shoulder. The bench where he'd once sat alone beneath a broken street lamp was now bathed in early sun. Across from him, the boy stood shyly, hands in his pockets, the same oversized hoodie swallowing his frame. He'd been listening that night to the story of the bike, the father, the silence that healed what words couldn't. Dwayne crouched slowly to the boy's eye level, reached into his coat, and pulled out the scorched license plate. edges blackened, numbers faded but still there. He didn't present it like a gift, he offered it like a torch. This, Dwayne said, was once part of something broken and beautiful. Maybe it's time it becomes part of something new. The boy's eyes widened as he took it. Hands, trembling with reverence. Dwayne placed a firm hand on his shoulder, eyes kind but steady. For your first rebuild, no more words needed. The boy nodded once, the kind of nod that understood more than his age should allow. The bus rumbled up the hill, old and wheezing, paint chipped like memory. Dwayne climbed aboard without fanfare, choosing a seat near the back. No tinted windows, no black car waiting, just a man on a journey that didn't need an audience. As the bus pulled away, he looked out at the boy holding the plate, sunlight catching the metal just right, as if the past had blessed the future. Inside the bus, Dwayne leaned back, eyes half closed. The road unspooled in front of him, simple, endless. He thought about the fire, the silence, the forgiveness that came not with drama, but with restraint. And somewhere in his chest, a peace he hadn't known in years began to settle, because in a world that begged him to fight, to prove, to roar, he had chosen stillness. And sometimes, the most powerful thing a man can do is walk away whole. Sky was soft with morning haze, the kind that blurs rooftops and rounds the edges of memory. The town moved slowly, as if it knew something had shifted. Not loud, not earth-shattering, just real. Something in the air felt cleaner. Dwayne stood by the same cracked sidewalk where it all began. Coat zipped, duffel over his shoulder, boots planted firm in damp gravel. Across from him, near the diner wall where the mural now lived, the boy waited. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Dwayne reached into his coat pocket, pulled out the old license plate, edges scorched, numbers worn by fire and time. He looked at it for a long moment, fingers grazing the charred curve of metal like he was saying goodbye. Then he knelt in front of the boy. "This used to be mine," he said quietly. "Before that, it was my dad's, and now, it's yours." The boy's eyes widened, unsure at first, then slowly lifting his hands. He took it with the same care someone might use holding a piece of sky. "For your first rebuild," Dwayne added with a nod, "start with this." The bus pulled up just as the boy clutched the plate to his chest, not like a souvenir, but like a promise. Dwayne climbed aboard, choosing a seat near the back. The driver didn't say anything, just nodded. The kind of nod men give other men when there's nothing left to prove. Through the window, the boy stood alone on the curb. Behind him, the mural shimmered in early light, the bike reborn in paint, frozen mid-ride, like it still had places to go. As the bus pulled away, Dwayne leaned into the hum of the engine, gaze fixed on the passing trees, the flicker of fences, the winding road. He didn't think about who was right or wrong. He didn't think about the fire or the silence. He thought about forgiveness, how it rarely makes a sound when it arrives, but changes everything once it does, and he understood. Something now? Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is let go of what burned and keep riding toward what still might bloom.